Hey guys, welcome to the Himprovement podcast, where the mission is to help young men develop their character, identity, and mindset in order to activate their potential and achieve their goals in life. Today on Himprovement, we have another special guest. His name is Scott Carson. He is one of the hosts of the Campfire Project. He's also a mentor and coach, and his mission is to create as many smiles and conversation as possible, which he does with his socks. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Thanks, Kamari. Thanks, mate. Thanks for having me on. I'm actually really stoked to be having a conversation with you, because the way in which we met and the conversation we started our relationship, I feel privileged to be here today. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming on to the show. And I'm really excited for our conversation today, just based on what we've talked about the past few times. I think that you can really offer a lot of value to the audience. And so I guess to help with that, to give them an idea of who you are, could you give them some extra info about yourself?
Yeah, cool. No worries. Look, I'm just a bloke trying to be the best version of himself. I've started my life's journey a little bit different to most. 30 years ago, I was on the streets. A rat bag kid that was cutting a bit loose. Ended up on the streets. A single mother who was having to look after himself and the two brothers. Basically ended up kicking him out because she couldn't handle him. And that's fair enough. So that was a bit of a tough road. I eventually got taken in by another family, which gave me an opportunity to see life through a different set of eyes.
Yeah, I respect that. And just from what I know about you and all the things that you do, one thing that I see that you're really good at is taking those negative experiences that you had in your life and turning them into positives. And when I mean positives, I mean like finding ways to improve the lives of others and make other people smile. And so let's touch on that a little bit. And so one of the projects that you're working on, if I'm correct, is called Smiles for Miles, right?
Yeah, that's what's one adventure we're taking on. It's a run from Sydney to Melbourne, so roughly 1,330 Ks, which is roughly 826 miles over 25 days. We're going to be averaging 53 Ks a day. And we're doing it for a pretty big purpose. We're here to create conversations, and we're here to get a little bit further than your normal conversations and just talk about our dark days, because we all have them. No one's getting out of that. Right. But how do we talk about them, right? How do we sit there and open it up? Well, we don't actually have to talk about them. We just have to listen to one another when someone else is talking. So as we're running from Sydney to Melbourne, there's actually a lot of layers to this journey. So as you heard me just say, I was on the streets at 14. I've had a pretty interesting relationship with my father over the years. And over the last sort of 4 to 5 years, I've sort of been working on reconnecting with him. So one of the big parts of this journey is he's going to be my support group. And then my 10-year-old son, who he's met 3 times now, is going to join us halfway through the journey so that we can create a new narrative beyond our pain. Part of what has been my life's journey thus far is working out who I am, trying to be the best version of myself. This journey is a pretty big analogy for my life. It's going to be painful. It's going to be a pretty emotional journey, especially having my father there and my son. But it's going to be made a whole lot easier by sharing smiles with people. So hence the miles for smiles. While we're on the journey, I've actually got the socks here. We're aiming to hand out 10,000 pairs of socks while we're running. And we'll stop and hand them out and talk to people, because these socks have got a significant meaning behind them.
Yeah, please explain that.
Yeah, well, definitely. For those that are listening and not watching, they're bright yellow with black polka dots. Those black polka dots represent our dark days. We all have them. No one's getting out of that. The yellow, the bright yellow, that's that sunshine, that beautiful winter sunshine that sits on your back, that real warmth. That's our community getting around you on your dark days. And for those of you who are listening, I have black dots as earrings. And they're quite significant, because our dark days are generally between our ears. So let's talk about them. Because the most valuable real estate you have is between your ears. If you don't own that space, something else does. So it's really important to work towards owning that. And I think that's the greatest challenge that I've had in my life, is just to own me, own my choices, take responsibility for me. So this run, the journey that we're taking, we're being supported by Mentoring Men, which is a fantastic opportunity. James, who's had a similar opportunity with his father growing up, we're going to be running all the way down the east coast of Australia, sharing smiles, creating positive stories, positive energy to help us get through this run. But not only just this run, it's through our lives. Because the relationship with my father has held me in a place of anger, insecurity, and just into an energy of lacking words to really put the energy, but it's a heavy energy that I carried whenever I talked about my father. So I realized through mentoring other people, and one of the conversations that I actually had was with a guy who, he was having a lot of trouble with his children, and they weren't speaking to him anymore. And this was a really interesting thing, because I didn't speak to my father. And I watched how much pain that created for him, and the energy, the heaviness that held for him. I sat there and looked at my son, and I went, that would kill me if he never spoke to me. It's the one thing that I don't think I could handle. It left me with the question, is that how my father feels? So I sat with that for a while until I worked on that scenario. And it's taken me years to get to the point where we are now.
What do you think was the catalyst for that? What do you think eventually sparked you to be able to move with that motion to start making those steps towards reaching back out to your father, developing a relationship with him, and also turning those negative feelings into something positive, or I guess into forgiveness?
Yeah, and that's interesting. I want to get onto forgiveness in a little bit. I want to grab that bit, but it's what changed that was how much joy I got out of my son. And it was funny, for my 40th birthday, my parents divorced when I was 9, and she put together an album for me of my life. I thought a lot of the stuff from my life actually disappeared. I never had any. And she put together these photos, and one of them was my father holding me when I was a little kid. He was picking me up smiling. And I'm like, wow. It's the time there that he was really happy with me. And that comparison to where I was with my son was like, do I have to do something about this? And I sat with it for 2 years before I even opened up that conversation. There's a lot of history there, you know, and I pride myself on being able to have really hard conversations. And the one that I really needed to have was with my father, my biggest pain.
I'm sure it was a tough conversation. And I guess one question I have about it is, what were your feelings going into that? You know, whenever you were, you know, I guess maybe staying outside the door or whatever, in those few minutes before you actually went in there to go face him and talk to him, what was going through your mind?
Yeah, and I want to thank you for that, because at that time in my life, I had a mentor by the name of Jerome Lamarck, and great guy. And with what I was doing and how I was helping people, he goes, you really have to take on your biggest challenge, your father. How can you authentically talk about it with other people if you haven't done it yourself? And I said, I'll give credence to that. So I didn't know exactly where he lived, but I knew roughly where he lived. So I just jumped on the phone. I picked up the phone and called him. Said, hey, how are you? Listen, I'm coming through your area. Are you okay if we catch up? Instead of be good, I said, yeah, you're free now. He goes, yeah, I can make myself free. So we caught up at the local pub, which is a hotel. And that's actually where I grew up, this pub. I walked into that pub 20 years since the last time I've been in there. The same people are still drinking there. I used to be a handful. It was an uncomfortable feeling just going in there. But as I sat there, my back to the wall, looking out over everybody, looking at the way in which their lives had gone, nervous, because I didn't know how this was going to go, but I knew I had to do it. My father comes in. I was drinking water. Comes in, grabs a pint, sits down. We start talking. Oof, so this will get me a little bit here because this is I haven't talked about this section a lot. We're sitting there and we've done the niceties. How you doing? What's going on? I said to him, so I don't know how this is going to go. I said, I'm nervous. I said, because my only memory that sits with me from your mother is her when her kidneys exploded and she bloated from alcohol poisoning. The big yellow balloon. That's how I remember it. I'm talking with him and I said, listen, I need to see you through a different set of eyes. I said, because when I talk about you with anger and fear. I said, when I talk about you with the people that matter most to me, my wife and my son, they feel that. So in order for us to have a relationship moving forward, I've got to be able to see you through a different set of eyes so they feel me talk about you differently. And then I explained to him what happened with his mother, and I said, I don't want my son to see that. I don't want that to be a part of his life because that haunts me. And from that moment, he put down his drink. That's the first time I'd ever seen him not finish the drink. We sat and we talked for a little bit and I said, I'll catch up with you again. When we caught up, I asked him, I said, listen, just in what I do these days, I share my life, I share my pain, my good, my bad, my ugly, my wins. I'd like to record this conversation so that I can get to know you. But more importantly, I'm going to share our pain so others can understand that. And that's when I did the interview, which you saw the other day.
Okay. And so I'm sure that was extremely tough, just from how you described it to me going into that situation, with all those bad memories and also looking at them through that bad lens, like you talked about, and having to sit there and talk to them. And so at least what I would think is that from having an experience like that, and then eventually after doing that conversation you had where you recorded it, I'm sure that you probably grew a lot from that, or, especially like when it came to like relationships and such. And so could you kind of dive into that a little bit? How would you say it affected your relationships, not just with him, but I would say in general, from being able to, I guess, throw away that last part of negativity that was, still sitting in the back of your head, that one thing that was kind of limiting you from, I guess, being completely free and open in the way you interacted with people?
Yeah, and thank you for that, because it was a challenge for my whole family. It was a challenge of how things happened at Christmas, catching up with the family. We couldn't work in the same rooms. We couldn't be around each other, so everything had to be negotiated. We missed out on a lot of family functions. We still miss out on bits and pieces because it's growing. It's taking time. Like it's a big thing, so we take time and not putting pressure on it. So that had an impact on everybody else that we engage with.
Right.
That's the impact of not dealing with these relationships. It's not just you and that person. It's the energy it carries for other people in and around you and your situation. So that's that's been a big thing, like the number one thing for me that's come out of this is until I understood how he grew up, I just had anger. Because of the opportunity of me learning him and how he grew up and what he had to deal with, doesn't mean that I forgive him for what happened.
Right.
I just accept that that's an understanding for what he went through.
Okay, so in a way, what you're saying is that kind of taking the time to look at his background and where he came from and what experiences could have influenced who he became, you were able to empathize. While you didn't necessarily agree with him being like that or forgive him, you could see how his environment influenced him to eventually be that way and take on those antisocial tendencies that led to him being that person that you saw through that bad lens, right?
100%. 100%. Like it's 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 fascinating. I'm going to go off track a little bit to go on track. So my gorgeous son is 10 years old, and like he's my greatest teacher. The other day something came up about a Ouija board, and fear came out. What's a Ouija board? And there's a lot of talk about it amongst his friends and all this stuff going on. There's a movie out called Ouija, which he caught a glimpse of, and then he watched the trailer, and so his fear came out. And I said to him, listen, that's really interesting. I said, do you know what a Ouija is and a Ouija board? There's no. I said, why don't we learn what a Ouija board is? Why don't we learn what it does and how it works? So we did. We sat down and we Googled how Ouija boards work and the energy in which it works and where it came from, its full history. He went from fear to understanding, which is an acceptance, which allows you to move beyond the fear. That's what happened with my father. Fear and anger. I went to understand why he is who he is. It's an acceptance. So now we can both move on.
And so if I could ask a question right here, just to kind of gain some insight on your specific situation, what you're saying is that after you went to that place of empathy, of understanding, it got to the point to where you couldn't really harbor those negative emotions or anything before. If anything, it was just almost as if like you felt bad or, sorry that he had gone through those experiences and that's the way that it shaped him. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, very much so. And it's not, I just felt I walked with him a little bit. And I just accept it is what it is. Like this, and gentlemen, you may or may not know David Goggins. You heard of David Goggins?
Yeah, definitely heard of David Goggins.
Right, okay. So, well, Goggins came to Australia, right? And he came, I was lucky enough to do a training session with him. I was fine on the jumping jacks and the lunges, but as soon as it got to push-ups and sit-ups, he smashed everybody. Right. But the interesting thing was, and the thing that I took away most, because it related to me, was there's things that it doesn't talk about in his book, and I don't know how much he talks about this, but when he actually went back to see his father before he passed away.
Oh, really? I didn't know that, because I read the book and he never did talk about anything like that in the book. He didn't even talk about his death, actually. So
yeah, well, let's look, and it's an interesting thing. Like, I don't know if I'm giving it away but he was being interviewed by Jen Mann, and it was a really interesting interview. But the one thing that really stood out for me was when he went back to see his father, he was going back, driving back to see him. As he's going there, in his mind, he's going back and back and back until he's back to that 8-year-old kid again. And then he sat there and he learnt about his father. And he learned about how his father grew up. And he didn't go there with anger to put on him. He just went there to learn who his father was. And as he left, he came back to his age twice as fast because he was able to accept it is what it is. And then in essence, that's similar to what I've done. When I went to see my mum, I was full of fear and I didn't know how that was going to go. I just knew that I had to do that. I had to go back and just understand. Because once we understand something, we don't fear it. So if anyone's ever going to interview David Goggins, I would highly recommend to ask about that, because I think it was one of the most amazing growth periods of his life. It was one day.
Wow. I mean, just from what I know about his relationship with his dad and from the book, because he talked about it growing up, how he was abusive and everything. It's just amazing to me that despite all that, he could still, I guess, have that emotional maturity and that empathy to be able to go back and reflect and try and come from a place of understanding. Because, you know, if anybody could decide that they didn't want to empathize or forgive, I would say it could definitely be him, just based on the stuff that he talks about. And so, you know, I'm sure that definitely helped him with his development as a man too, developing into who he is now, taking the time to do something like that. And I would say, do you feel like it was kind of a similar thing for you, where after you put that behind you, you started to see growth in your development in different areas?
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. Because it's that understanding and growth, like it's not, that's our foundations. It's the foundations to who we are. The number one question that we have so much trouble answering and asking, who am I? What am I? What am I meant to do? That's a tough one to go through. And I love David Goggins' accountability mirror, because there is absolutely nothing you can do about anybody else. The only thing you can change is you. If you want a different response to a situation, you have to take it on in a different format. You have to try and see it through a different set of eyes so that then you can move beyond it. And until that point, you're staying in the same lane, you know, and that's something for me that has stuck with me, you know, like, and I'm inside the private group, the Campfire Project, which I do a bit of hosting, is the conversation with my father. And I think you will see, if you watch that, and I think you'll experience this, the growth for both of us in just my father sharing his story and me hearing it. Because that not only does that allow him to share his pain, but it allowed me to get a better understanding of who and why and what I'm doing.
You know, the thing about it is that you talked about that having that conversation with yourself of who am I and how these things kind of play into that. And then also talked about how this situation specifically affected that view of yourself and who you are and have become. And it just kind of makes me think about how valuable this could be for young men, because the thing is, you know, having these conversations so late in life, while it's good to have them, you know, eventually I can only imagine how much more helpful it could have been if like that same type of growth and development could happen for guys like in their 20s and 30s, you know, if they could get into the habit of having these tough conversations whenever they're young, developing those skills and getting that comfortability, I guess you could say, when they're like in their developmental years as a man, I'll say, because that's when I think that, you know, in my opinion, that's when you really start to learn who you are, develop an identity, and develop into the man that you're going to be once you get into your 20s and you're on your own and you're going through the whole process of, you know, dating, career, finding family, and that sort of thing. And so I think that's definitely, a great thing to touch on. Actually, we can kind of segue into that because I know it's something that you've talked about too, having those tough conversations for young men. Could you kind of, I guess, give your take on that?
Yeah, look, I'd love to, because I think, I'm really grateful for this day and age that we're in. Here we are, we're in Texas, we're in Melvin, and we're having a conversation about life.
Right.
And we're learning about each other. This is the opportunity that we're in right now. This is the opportunity that we're having for our growth, is the fact that we are actually starting to have these conversations. You and I have spoken about, there's no way known our fathers had anywhere to talk about these things. Yet we as men now are having these platforms where we're discussing the important things in life. But it's where do you discuss those important things? Because that's the key to the conversations and how to grow beyond it. Because not everybody can empathize with you because people haven't learnt that yet. And it's a skill that we're learning and we're growing from. And I think that's fantastic. But here's the thing. You've got to understand where your influence comes from, because your input determines your output. So as a young guy, if you've got something you need to speak about, are your mates the right people to be talking about it with? They're the same age. What's their experience with this situation? With my son, I have a very clear understanding that there's an invisible chain between us. That chain comes with trust, acceptance, and a responsibility to each other, that we have to be honest inside that. If at any point we break that chain, yes, we can weld it back together, but we're going to see those welds. But eventually that'll become too fragile to repair. So we need to keep that together. And I share that with him so that at any time, no matter what happens, he can come to me to talk, to get the truth of what I value and I see. And if I don't have the answer, we'll go and find somebody in that field to get it for him. So far as a 10-year-old boy, I've had to have conversations about cocaine. I had to have conversations about porn, about being transgender, about non-binary. But here's the thing. He's not learning it from the schoolyard, where I don't know where that comes from, and they generally make up the scenario based upon TV and not quite sure. He comes back to me because he knows he's going to get an honest truth. And so I tell you what, I don't want to have those conversations sometimes, because I look at this young boy and go, is that too much for you to handle? And I look at it and go, he's asked me the question. I will give him enough information to turn around and say, that's a fair bit of knowledge. Are you okay with that knowledge? Do you need to know more? Or are we okay? Because I'm happy to give you more, but that's a fair bit of information for you to take in. Is that okay? And he'll answer yes or no, and we'll continue the conversation. So the key to this is know where you get your information. Go to people with experience in those fields, because that's where you're going to get growth. Because it all comes back to, what is the truth of the situation? My truth, talking about my life, set me free. Alan Stevens, who you've met, when I first presented to him, I didn't think he wanted to hear anything I had to say. And then I shared with him my story. And now we work in the Campfire Project together. Your truth and finding the truth for that situation is so important. But make sure you get experienced people to help you through it. That's why mentors are so important. Mentors are just so important. A mentor can be a local sports coach. A mentor can be a teacher that goes a little bit above and beyond.
Yeah, I'm glad that you touched on that. Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, look, this is a big conversation, right? And the key to it is that this is the start of a conversation. This conversation only works if other people take pieces of this conversation and expand it. That's when we know we're having an impact. Yeah,
and I guess the thing that I kind of took from what you're saying, just to kind of interject, was making sure that you talk to the right people. I think that's a major key right there, because the thing about it is that some people might not have the ability, or I'll say care enough about your situation to really be able to offer value when you open up to them about different experiences and such. And so when you talked about your experience with Alan and talking to him about your life story, and then getting that positive reaction from him and working with him moving forward after that, that's just an example of how talking to the right people about these things can lead to future opportunities and then lead to future healing. And so I think that that's definitely something important that needs to be said. And you talked about the role of mentors and that too, finding other men that you can go to that might have more experience that can help you to walk through some of these experiences and give you insights that you might not have thought of on your own, that can kind of give you the answers or help you to be able to come up with the answers on your own, if that makes sense.
100%. You know, he's like, I'm so grateful for my opportunities in life. You know, like I mean, I'm a founder of the Business of Smiles, which is an amazing group of people who, yes, I founded it, but I don't own it. We work together and we create more smiles. You know, that's what the Miles of Smiles is. We have the Campfire Project, where we have the really tough conversations, but I don't have them in the Business of Smiles, because I need to keep that in a place where we just feel safe enough to be. So I think it's the one thing in our life is, where are we safe enough to talk? Where are we safe enough to share what's really going on? That's why we need to find experienced people to be able to speak to about these things, because we need to have a level of trust in the people that we're having the conversations with. If I look at my mates about, and I go, okay, I need to have a conversation about my relationship with my wife. Aren't they the best people, or are they just going to sit there and just, you know, fuel it because they're going through the same situations? I need to go to somebody who's had experience with those relationships so they can keep me accountable to my actions. Because here's the key. It's not my wife's problem if she's not hearing what I'm saying. It's actually my responsibility to give her a language that she can understand and take further. That's my responsibility to be heard, not hers. If somebody's not listening to you, you're not sharing it with them in a way that they need to hear it. There's a good chance you're not listening to them. You know, so that's gone a little bit sideways, but this is all part of why mentors are so important, and identifying those mentors in your life. I've got 5 key mentors in my life at any one point in time, so that you know, there's relationships, there's money, there's business, you know, there's friendships and social stuff. Then there's my physical. How do I keep myself physically strong? Because it's so important to me. Where do you have those conversations? That's where you need to be specific. Know where you can go to. You know, in today's society where there's so much going on, you know, what's right, what's wrong? Truth is, there's nothing right and wrong. It's just what works for you and what doesn't work for you. You know, you and I had the conversation the other day about how, you know, communication, how do we communicate with each other?
All right, so we are back to the show. And so we just had one more topic that we wanted to touch on before we closed out. And so you're kind of touching on this already before we had to take a quick break, and it was about community. And so one of the things that I would really appreciate it if you could talk about is how to find a community. How do you find the mentors? How do you find the brothers and the people that you can talk to have these tough conversations that you need to, and also to get that advice to get through some of these tough spots that some of these young guys may be going through in their lives?
Yeah, that's brilliant. And that's a great question to ask, because where do you start? Like, you know, stuff's going on in your life. Where can you go? What is safe? Go and try places. Google on your phone these days. You know, in my neighborhood, what have we got going on? Go and sit with it. If it feels good, sit and listen. You don't have to speak first. If it sounds like a place where you feel comfortable, safe, and you feel like you can trust the circle that you're in, great, share your experience. But if you don't, try something else. Keep trying something. One of my favorite quotes, Paulo Coelho, it's always the last key on the ring that opens the door, yeah? When you're fumbling through the keys, you go, which one is it? It's always the last one. Because you just got to keep trying, keep trying, keep trying. Find groups on the internet that are supportive. Listen to the language that they use. Are they building people? Are they listening? Because if they are, there's a good chance they're going to listen to you. I'm a part of the Campfire Project, where there is a plethora of people who will sit there and listen to you. There is conversations inside the Campfire Project. Last year, I had 35 conversations on big topics: death, suicide. Does size matter? I sat with 5 women and talked about penis size. That's a big conversation, yeah?
Yeah, big conversation.
But it's something that some people think is super important, and to them it is. But where can I talk about that safely? So go and listen to conversations and see what you can learn, and then reach out to those people. I run the business of smiles. It's a Facebook group where we just share smiles, because I think we need a place to just feel safe. And I keep that place there just to be safe. But if you want to have a conversation, I take it away from that community and go into the Campfire Project, where I know I can have the big, tough conversations where there's people with experience in those conversations. Interview people, question people. If you've got a subject where I'm having a big fight with my wife and I don't know how to handle it, or it looks like we're going to get divorced, I think it's all going to poo, and you don't want to go and talk to your mate that hasn't been through that, because he's going to support you because he cares about you. So he's going to increase that. He's not going to hold you accountable. So you want to go to somebody who's been through that and knows that experience and understands that experience. So interview people. So I'm going through this. Have you had any experience with that? No, but okay. Thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate that. Next person. I'm going through this. Have you had any experience with that? Well, actually, yes. This is what happened in my life. Listen to the stories, because there's keys, there's little elements that just help you. And you don't. The one thing, if I could gift it to everybody, don't aim to solve everything like that. It doesn't happen. Just look for small bits of growth consistently. Okay, I've learned that now. I'm going to try that. I'm going to implement that. We'll see how that goes. See if that makes an improvement. That's really important. So finding communities and being around people it takes effort, right? It takes effort to go and make these things happen. But here's the key. You're worth it. You're worth the effort to find your people. You're worth the effort to find where you fit in. If you're a square trying to fit into a round hole, thank you for showing me that I don't fit in here. Okay, next. Where can we fit? That excites me when I find somewhere where I don't belong. Because I'm like, cool. What can I learn from this experience that I can take to my next experience? What don't I like is just as important as what do I like. Because if you can see what you don't like, okay, I don't like this. What's the opposite of that? Ah, cool. So maybe I'll like this. So we're not going to try that. How cool is that?
One thing that's interesting about this to me is that it's weird how when you go into these different types of groups and communities, like what you talk about, these people can be complete strangers to you. And just from talking to you for 5-10 minutes, they'll care more about your well-being and more about the situation that you're struggling with than some of the people that might have been in your life for the entire time. And I guess to give the benefit of the doubt, it honestly might just be because due to the fact that they took the time to be in a group like that, they see the the need that people would have for someone to be that supportive to them. And the people that are in your regular life just may not have that. And so I think that's something that guys should consider too, where when you have a group of people who are all looking for that same thing, see the value in having a community and how that support can help you move through those tough situations, even though they may not know you yet anyway, they can provide just as much value, if not probably more, than the people that have been there through that situation with you.
Yeah, and that in itself is a beautiful thing, because more often than not, those that don't know you are curious. They ask questions because they need to understand it. In that curiosity, it creates an open mind of possibility. Whereas with people you know, they've got a lot more invested in the fact that they know you, they know this, they know that, you know them, you know this. You need to get a new experience to bring it into the old experience to make it a different experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the beautiful thing about communities. Like I pride myself on being available to different communities so that I get different perspectives, because no one thing is the right thing. It's like a pair of shoes, right? A pair of shoes for me is the most important item anyway that you can spend money on.
For a runner, right? Definitely for what you do.
Yeah.
I would imagine that shoes are extremely important when you're going beyond ultra marathons and things. Like you're running, like I think it converts like 860 something miles. So
yeah, well, here's the thing, right? That's the foundations of my body. It's the foundations of me. How I treat my feet is how I treat my body. I spend time on my feet, strengthening my feet. And I go and get my shoes tested. I get analyzed every time I put on a new pair of shoes, because one pair of shoes in the next models are different to the next model. Literally, I just got my pairs for the run, and they're a little bit narrower in this one point, and it affects my feet. But it may not affect your feet. So one pair of shoes doesn't fit every foot. So it's so important to find the pair of shoes that does fit your foot, because it's your foundations, you know. And in life, we get gifted our parents. They're our parents. For whatever reason, they're our parents. We don't ask. That's what we get given. They have something that's their life, their foundations, and they create our foundations. But it's up to us to make choices to strengthen our foundations beyond them. That's what our growth is. Our growth can be so much more than just our foundations if we're willing to have a crack, you know. And I think that's awesome. I think that's, you know, if I could give one bit of advice to everybody, you know, inside your community, is to just have a crack. You know, you don't know until you try. I didn't know that I could be me until I voiced it. But I had to find a community that wanted to hear and help that. The Campfire Project was that community.
This is great. And it's great to hear that the community was what helped you to be able to flourish into who you are today. And I'm glad that you brought that up. And so for those guys that are out there listening right now, I hope that's something that they consider, where if they put themselves in a group with like-minded people, people that are working through similar situations and are working to be better and I guess become champions from that struggle that they might be going through, it can lead to them being the best version of themselves, just having those positive influences around them. And so I guess just to kind of close out now, for anyone that wants to look you up or I guess find more information about what you do, where can they find you?
Yeah, the Business of Smiles, www.ihopeyou'resmiling.com. I hope you are smiling, spelled correctly. I hope you are smiling.com. Otherwise, check out the Facebook group, the Campfire Project. There's some amazing conversations in there and big conversations. There's panelists in there of what, if you're going through something in life and you're just not sure of the direction, go in there, have a look at the different topics. I'm pretty sure we've covered most of them. And if you haven't, if there's a topic you need covered, there's a topic you need to discuss, reach out to me. Let me know what it is, and I'll put the best people I can find together to have a conversation about that particular thing, so that you can sit and listen. And then if there's something you hear in that, you can trial it. You can reach out to us. We take that responsibility, because you're worth it. We are worth it. We're worth having these conversations.
Yeah, so I'll make sure to put those links in the description as well for your website, and then also for the Campfire Project. So anybody that would like to join that community and be a part of it will get that chance too. And so other than that, I really enjoyed the conversation today. I think that we offered a lot of value to the listeners. I think we touched on some very important topics. I hope we'll kind of spark some thought or some discussion among the guys that are listening. And so I just wanted to say thank you again for coming on the show. Thank you for taking the time to support me in my mission in doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for making a difference. Thank you for having a crack at making a difference, because that's where it's at.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well,
Beautiful.
I guess that's everything. Well, hey, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, Scott.
I will. Thank you. You too. Enjoy. And I look forward to having a chat again. I think we've got a lot more to offer.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So I'm a member of the Campfire Project now, and also joined the Smiles group. So I'm sure we'll be talking again sometime soon.
I'm looking forward to a one-on-one in the campfire.
All right. Sounds good then. All right. Well, take care.
Take care, everyone.